Like in particular Mozambique, I was asked for a lot of information on, but the flow was normally the other way around, was from the intelligence to the secretariat, and as a result of that, there could be follow-up requests.
Yes, but as head of the security branch intelligence section at that time, did you have a full plate? You had full days. You were busy with multiple issues and incidents that took up your time.
My lady, I was running an intelligence operation that was a very complex web of agents and officers throughout Southern Africa, Central Africa, Europe, United States, even West Africa. It was very much more than a full-time job, my lady.
Because I just wanted to check with you, Mr. Williamson. Is there a possibility that because you had so much on your plate, and more than 10 years later you are now considering what to apply for amnesty, that simply escaped your attention? Is that a possibility?
No, my lady. What, if I remember, Jaap van Jaarsveld's amnesty application was not the only one that I won't say irritated me, but in effect that is what it did. I mean, something that was ridiculous and didn't apply to me, and my attitude in those days was that if people felt that they'd been involved in something, that it would be to their advantage to apply for amnesty, they should go ahead and do it. It wasn't up for me to encourage or instruct people to apply for amnesty. That was an individual decision. And on occasion, I saw amnesty applications which I regarded as absurd.
So what's your answer as to whether or not there is a possibility that could have escaped you?
I was aware of the application. I did get the letter, and perhaps I should have taken it more seriously, but I knew that it hadn't happened and that his allegations were incorrect, and I knew that I would have an opportunity in a forum to address it. But I didn't take it any further, my lady.
All right, well, at least we've now excluded from your perspective that this simply didn't slip your mind. But I want to put it to you that you didn't know that you would have an opportunity to respond to the allegations in relation to the Cradock 4 murders. And the reason I put that to you is because you were only going to appear in relation to the amnesty applications that you yourself submitted in relation to Ruth First, Jeanette Katrin Skuren, and the London bombing. So you couldn't have known beforehand that the Cradock 4 case would arise in those matters.
Yeah, I assumed it would, my lady, but obviously it may not have, but it would have been very unusual for it not to have arisen. Similarly to all the matters that have been raised here this morning, all sorts of tangential activities that I've been involved in through my career.
Yes, and as it turns out, it was raised, in fact, and we are going to consider your testimony in that amnesty hearing. But I do think that my learned friend for the State, Advocate Coltman, does have a point. That you should have at least instructed your lawyers to appear at the Van Jaarsveld amnesty hearing to object and rebut and cross-examine Mr. van Jaarsveld on that aspect?
With hindsight, my lady, I regret that I didn't, but I didn't take his allegations seriously because they were absurd.
And perhaps it's time to turn to the amnesty hearing in question. My lady, we're now dealing with Mr. Williamson's amnesty hearing. There were several days. We're going to focus on day 11, and the amnesty transcript is in volume L1, which we handed up yesterday. It's item 9. The page numbers of the transcripts are not numbered, but in the original we'll be dealing with pages 29 to 33. Yes. Oh, that's right. We actually numbered the bundle ourselves. I'm looking at my old copy, which is handwritten. But my learned friend is correct. They are numbered.
The one before the court will be done.
So we're at what page, Mr. Barney?
So the amnesty hearing itself starts at item 9.
Yes, that.
And it does start at page 1. This is a hearing that took place on the 22nd of September 1998 in Pretoria. It's day 11 of that hearing. But we're going to jump to page 29, my lady. So in that hearing, Mr. Williamson, you were questioned by Advocate Bezos, and he asked whether in the first half of 1984, did you send any member of your group to Port Elizabeth? And you responded, it is possible, Mr. Chairman. And he asked you to try and think about it, and you respond that by 1984 and 85 I had a group that by that time had 9 sections in it, and it's absolutely possible that I would have sent somebody to Port Elizabeth for some reason, that I may have been asked to send somebody to Port Elizabeth for some reason, and in fact I'm even sure I know who I'm going to be told now I sent to Port Elizabeth, but I do not have any recollection of the incident. Do you still stand by that statement?
Yes, my lady.
You see, what interests us is that you don't say, I wouldn't have done this because I only did external operations. You accept that you might have sent somebody to Port Elizabeth, but you have no recollection in relation to whether it was Mr. van Jaarsveld.
My lady, people working in my section, particularly junior people like Mr. van Jaarsveld, periodically visited various security branches around the country for 2 reasons. Number one, to get to know the people operating on the ground and to get some knowledge and experience. And then also to find out from the people what particular issues were being raised and were important. And in specific, strategic communication was a unit which was analyzing and then drafting strategies which could be used to counteract what one can call political propaganda, but from the non-state side. So they were people who were involved in working out state propaganda as opposed to, or call it counter-propaganda. So they would interact with people throughout the country.
Let's move on to what you said in relation to Mr. Jaap van Jaarsveld. And you also confirm in that hearing that it's possible that you might have sent a member of your group to PE at that time. You said it's perfectly possible. Amongst other things, one of my sections, or one of the sections of the group of which I was involved in student activities, and these people travelled regularly all over the country to all the divisions. So can I, in fact, even say I must have sent people there? And then you turn to Mr. Jaarsveld and you say, but if Mr. Bezos is referring to Captain at the time, I believe, Jaap van Jaarsveld, and the evidence that he gave at the TRC hearing in the Eastern Cape, that I sent him down to do a recce or give advice on the killing of, I believe it was Ganiwe or the PEPCO 3 or some of those people, I have absolutely no idea what he is talking about. And when Mr. Bezos probes you further, you say, I don't think that if I was involved in an operation to Hull 8, you recall that it was Mr. van Jaarsveld's evidence that he was sent down to advise on the taking out of Mr. Ganiwe. You state, I don't think that if I was involved in an operation to Hull 8 or take out Matthews Ganiwe in 1984, that I would have sent that particular officer. That was not his forte, Mr. Chairman. Can you just explain what you meant by that was not his forte?
Mr. Chairman, my lady, Jaap van Jaarsveld was a young lieutenant when he joined my unit. He was a theologian. He was working in strategic communication. And the idea that I would have used somebody with his knowledge and experience and lack of operational ability or experience to do such a job is inconceivable, given the fact that as everybody knows, I've been involved in various other operations, such as the London bombing, and we had at our disposal people who would have been far more competent to do that type of or to carry out that type of instruction. That is the point I was trying to make, and that it's almost ludicrous to think that I would send a young, inexperienced, non-operational officer to go to the Eastern Cape and talk to the security branch, the headquarters, and then in a hotspot like Cradock, to give people like that advice. It wouldn't have happened, and it didn't happen.
So, for those kinds of missions, you would have sent experienced people who had done this type of thing before, individuals who had been in operations in which targets had been eliminated.
My lady, one of the, I would almost call it strange aspects of Jaap van Jaarsveld's evidence is the fact that he didn't seem to know who Saki van Zyl was. Saki van Zyl was a hardened ex-Kufut operator, and for anybody to think that I would have sent young Jaap van Jaarsveld to give Saki van Zyl advice or instructions on how somebody should be taken out is, as I said, my lady, ludicrous.
You say that Mr. van Jaarsveld You say he didn't know who Saki van Zyl was?
From the way that I read his evidence in the beginning, he didn't even seem to know that the person that he was going with was Saki van Zyl. And he obviously didn't know Saki van Zyl's reputation or position.
Yes.
And Saki van Zyl outranked him anyway.
Well, my recollection of Mr. van Jaarsveld's evidence before the Truth Commission is that Mr. van Zyl travelled with Mr. van Jaarsveld on that particular mission.
That's correct, Mr.
Yes.
Wiley.
And there was some dispute about that. I don't want to dive into the paperwork, which will take up time, but my learned friends will correct me if I'm wrong. But when Mr. van Jaarsveld was asked to identify Mr. van Zyl, he was able to do so in that hearing. And the Amnesty Committee was satisfied that he knew who Mr. van Zyl was and that Mr. van Zyl had been on that mission with him.
Yes, I accept that. But what I was saying is that Jaap van Jaarsveld didn't seem to know, when I say who Captain Saki van Zyl is, the type of the man with the type of experience that Saki van Zyl had.
So you won't be surprised to hear that Mr. van Jaarsveld disagrees with you. And if I can refer you to Mr. van Jaarsveld's evidence, Melody, I'm now quoting from the Amnesty hearing of Mr. van Jaarsveld. It's in volume D at page 1015. I'll just quote what he says so that we don't have to scramble to find the document. It might be in that in that bundle, but I'll quote verbatim. Mr. Boyens, who was also representing an implicated person, asked Mr. van Jaarsveld, "Yes, I'm talking about them, but it seems as if it's almost 80 to 100 pages. Okay, fine, thank you. Mr. van Jaarsveld, I'm asking you a general question, and I don't expect from you to go into detail. The order that you got from Craig Williamson, was that a strange order? The order to go and see if this person can be killed or not?" And Mr. van Jaarsveld responds, "Mr. Chairperson, no. At that stage, a lot of that type of actions did occur in our country. These things started from as early as in the 1970s, and then there's the intervention." So Mr. van Jaarsveld is suggesting that this was not a strange order for him to have received at that time. Your response?
My lady, my response is similar, I think, to what I said before, and that is I cannot comment on what Jaap van Jaarsveld's motivation is for what he said, but that type of comment that has just been quoted to me is a generalized comment that we all know that this type of political and counter-political violence was happening in South Africa. But my unit never was involved in any internal counter-revolutionary violence. And Mr. van Jaarsveld was never sent to go and do any scoping, as he called it, or recce by me on Mr. Gonewe.
So you describe Mr. van Jaarsveld, as an academic, I suppose a desk person, not involved in these types of operations. We've looked into his background, and in particular his various amnesty applications, and these span between 1986 and 1987. Of course, this is post the Cradock 4, but it does seem that at some point in fact, he became quite an operative in the field. Milady, I'm not going to go through the amnesty applications, but they are in L1 under item 12. But just to summarize, he applied for amnesty for offences involving some 25 crimes, which included 12 killings. So that doesn't seem to suggest to us, at least, that this was a mere academic.
He was not. All his applications for acts of amnesty were after his. He was no longer involved in under my command, and I actually. I mean, again, my lady, it doesn't help to speculate, but I think that the fact that in later times he did get involved in these type of actions that he applied for amnesty for probably motivated his original or his amnesty application or his allegation about the Goniwe matter.
Yes. Just for the record, milady, his applications involved the Ribeiro murders. That was in December of '86. The murder of Pete Ntuli in July of '86. And then the Kwandebele incident in which 9 activists were murdered. So is it your evidence, Mr. Williamson, that while he was with you, he was an academic, and then post that he went into the field and engaged in these kinds of activities?
While he was with me, he was a desk officer, my lady. And in 1986, I was already gone from the security branch, and I was in the military intelligence.
Yes, I'm not suggesting that you were associated with those particular crimes.
Yes, my lady, and I think he in fact left security branch head office and was working perhaps in the Northern Transvaal branch. He was no longer at head office.
So, if I hear your evidence correctly, the nature of the request was not unusual. It's just that the person involved is not the kind of person you would have sent.
And it would have been unusual also, my lady, for my section to have been asked to do that. It was not our job. If they'd asked me to organise that for somebody in Gaborone or in Francistown, yes, that would have not surprised me. But inside the country, responsibility for everything, and perhaps when we get to what you mentioned about the line structure of command, we'll get to it, but my unit was not involved in internal activities and wouldn't have been parachuted in to advise a local security branch on how to do things.
You mentioned that his superior was somebody by the name of Vic McPherson.
That's correct, my lady.
And since this is a truth-seeking inquiry, is there a possibility that it was Vic McPherson, not you, who sent Van Jaarsveld to the Eastern Cape?
You're calling for the witnesses' speculation in this regard, Mr. Vernier?
Well, I am asking the witness if it's a possibility that Mr. Van Jaarsveld got mixed up, that he did carry out the mission to the Eastern Cape, but that the possibility arises that it wasn't Mr. Williamson, but his immediate superior, Mr. McPherson, who sent him down there?
Can you provide any assistance?
My lady, the very fact that Mr. van Jaarsveld said in his amnesty application that they'd thrown a stone through Janet Cherry's car window illustrates to me that he had probably been sent to the Eastern Cape by Captain Vic McPherson, who was the head of the Strategic Communication Branch, because that's exactly the type of foolishness that the Strategic Communication Branch carried out.
So you're putting up the possibility that it was McPherson who sent him down, because that was one of the incidents, the brick through the Janet Cherry car.
I can't say anything definitely, my lady, but that's a reasonable speculation.
So, as I understand you, you're not disputing that he went down to do this mission?
No, I've never said, I never dispute that he went to the Eastern Cape and that he was there on that particular day, because it's corroborated by the fact that he did break that window of that car. What that tells me is that is a typical strategic communication activity, usually carried out after a braai with a lot of brandies and cokes.
Just on that score, so that does illustrate that there were people in your section doing work internally, not just externally.
Well, he was there as an advisor, or to be mentored, or to see what was going on the ground. And then, of course, he gets involved with the people that are doing the work on the ground, the security branches. And what they then get up to, they get up to. But he was never, and smashing leftist activist car windows is one thing, but he was not sent there to do a recce on Goniwe or anybody else with any instruction to work out how best to take him out. That didn't happen.
Just removing yourself from the equation for the moment, are you disputing, are you denying that he went to the Eastern Cape to scope out the best way of killing? Are you saying that did not happen?
That did not happen, my lady.
Even though you concede that he was in the Eastern Cape at that time?
Yes, my lady, I don't deny he was in the Eastern Cape at that time.
So in the evidence of Mr. van Zyl, and lady, this is at volume D, page 162, in his amnesty testimony, he is asked by Mr. Boyens about whether he travelled with Mr. van Jaarsveld to do this scoping exercise. And interestingly enough, Mr. Williamson, he doesn't deny it. He says, I just can't remember. And he says it's unlikely, but I can't remember. But he doesn't deny that he travelled with Mr. van Jaarsveld to do this exercise.
Well, my lady, I can't speculate on whether they were carrying out the exercise, the scoping exercise that's alleged, or whether they were merely showing Mr. van Jaarsveld the situation on the ground in the Eastern Cape. But similarly to myself, I'm pretty sure that if Sakkie van Zyl had been given or had been told that was the task that Van Jaarsveld was there to do, he would probably have remembered. same as I said in my amnesty application, that had I ever given such an instruction, I would have remembered it. And I don't, because it didn't happen.
So, Mr. Williamson, the Amnesty Committee found Mr. van Jaarsveld in its decision to be a credible witness. It accepted that he had travelled to Port Elizabeth and then on to Cradock to do this scoping exercise. And he was granted amnesty for his role in the Cradock 4 murders. Are you saying that the Amnesty Committee got it wrong?
The Amnesty Committee based their decision on the evidence that was presented to them, and they made a decision. It's not for me to say whether it was wrong or not, my lady.
Well, except it directly contradicts your evidence.
Yes.
Presumably you are saying that the Amnesty Committee got it wrong.
When it comes to the so-called scoping exercise, which didn't happen, he got amnesty for something that didn't happen, and he's not the only one who got amnesty for things that didn't happen.
Mr. Williamson, like my learned friends for the state and the community, we have to put it to you that on this score, you are not being frank and honest with this court. We need to put it to you that we will be arguing that you were in fact asked to send on the 19th of March 1984, and that individual was in fact Mr. Jaap van Jaarsveld, who reported back on the best way of taking out Mr. Gniwe. That will be our argument before this honourable court. Your response?
I regret that argument, but it's incorrect. And as far as I'm concerned, I think as somebody who's been a reasonably high-ranking security police officer, military intelligence officer, and National Party politician, I can't think of anybody else that has gone to the lengths that I've gone to with the TRC, with the special hearings, to try and explain why what was done and why what was done. And perhaps it was wrong of me and incorrect to have ignored Jaap van Jaarsveld's allegation as so absurd that I shrugged it off and I didn't bother, because I had much bigger problems to deal with at the TRC. But all I can do, my lady, is assure the court that Mr. van Jaarsveld's version that I sent him to do a scoping operation on Gniwe in 1984 is devoid of all truth.
Mr. Williamson, when you applied for amnesty, I want to elicit your response to this. The cases that were high in your mind were the ones that you had a direct involvement in, such as the London bombings and such as the murders of the Skuurens and Ruth First. Is there not a possibility that some 12, 14 years later, that had completely slipped your mind? After all, your role was limited to simply sending somebody down to do a scoping exercise. And then thereafter, nothing happened. In fact, nothing happened for nearly 15 months. That could simply have slipped off your radar completely.
My lady, given everything else that I applied for amnesty for, had this happened, I would have dealt with it. And the reason I didn't is because I didn't feel that I had any reason to apply for amnesty for it. And once I got the letter from the TRC, I did apply my mind to it, and I regarded it as so ridiculous that I couldn't really be bothered with it, which, as I said, was probably a mistake, but given everything else that I was involved in at the time, I beg your indulgence for that.
Yes. Well, we will argue that it is likely that you took the view at that time, when you were considering the amnesty process, that your connection to this case was tenuous and couldn't be proved and didn't require an application.
My attitude was that I'm not going to apply for amnesty for something that didn't happen.
Let's now move to talking about the chain of command. And perhaps we can begin with your submission to the State Security Council, which was quite an illuminating submission that you made. This is the one, Milady, titled Aspects of State Counter-Revolutionary Warfare Principles and Strategy, Republic of South Africa in the 1980s, which was made on the 9th of October 1997. I take it that you do regard yourself as quite knowledgeable on this topic, counter-revolutionary warfare principles and strategy, at least as it pertained to South Africa in the 80s.
So, my lady, I can't call myself an expert, but I have practical experience, and I did study academically this type of strategic matters.
And just to assist the court, and here I'd like you to be brief if you can, you make reference to the State Security Council and its National Security Management System, and that these were part and parcel of a counterinsurgency campaign called the Total Strategy. Can you just explain to the court what this Total Strategy was in brief?
My lady, the way I understood it was that the revolutionary onslaught on South Africa was in every aspect of civil life, and that the response to this couldn't just be a military and police response. It had to be coordinated across all other aspects of government, and that's why I understood that the State Security Council and the management system came about in order that the state's counter-revolutionary strategy was applied right across the whole of government, every aspect of government. Political, military, economic, social, etc., my lady.
And in your submission, as well as in testimony that you have provided to the Truth Commission, can you explain to the court where the State Security Council was situated in the decision-making process?
Well, in my knowledge, my lady, the State Security Council was basically a subcommittee of the Cabinet and dealt with everything related to state security. And there was a secretariat that was, I think we already covered this, staffed by seconded officers from various state departments, and that the various inputs from the various departments went through to the Secretariat of the State Security Council, and their policy proposals and documents were put together, submitted to the actual State Security Council, and the State Security Council itself then decided, like I heard yesterday, Mr. De Beer saying that it would be referred then to Cabinet, because after that there would be the be-all and the end-all of the decision making was at the top, was at the Cabinet and at the State President.
So there was a level above the State Security Council, which included Cabinet. Were there any other structures that sat perhaps above the State Security Council?
Not that I'm aware of.
For example, would there have been special Cabinet committees on particular topics?
Yes, you mean like KIK, Coördinerende Inligtingskomitee. I think where only the military head, the police head, and the intelligence head sat.
Yes, for example, could you translate that for the court, please?
KIK is Coördinerende Inligtingskomitee. It's Coordinating Intelligence Committee. I hope I'm correct.
That's okay, we won't hold you to that translation. So that committee had, there were certain cabinet ministers sitting on that committee.
No, I think that was Directors General.
Directors General. So that would have been lower than cabinet.
Yes, but as you said, sort of between the State Security Council and the Cabinet.
Right. And then attached to Cabinet itself, were there special Cabinet committees ever established to look at particular issues, for example, such as deciding what operations to take against individual persons?
Not that I'm aware of at Cabinet level. Before my time, I don't know, my lady, whether we're being referring to Trevitz.
You can talk about Trevitz, yes?
That was established after I had already left, but there was in fact, we did discuss about the military intelligence officers who were based at the security branch head office. Before Trevitz, there was an informal target identification, if you like to call it grouping. And I mentioned also before in my evidence, my lady, the terrorist album. There was an album which had the photographs and biographical details of hundreds, if not thousands, of suspects, people involved in revolutionary activity. And so there was a structure, people who were specifically working on that type of activity, identification of specific individuals.
Which included targets for elimination.
Yes, my lady.
And can you just explain to the court Trevitz, what does Trevitz mean?
Teen revolutionaire task centrum or something, a counter-revolutionary task center or some such thing.
But it was essentially a body that dealt with target identification.
Identifying specific individuals involved in the in revolutionary activities.
As I understand your evidence, that was set up towards the end of 1985, but you were involved in the predecessor.
In its predecessor, yes, when it was less formal. Like military intelligence had people sitting at security branch head office, and there were national intelligence people, so everybody was just pooling as intelligence came in on individuals, especially when individuals were captured and interrogated. That information was all sent through.
And when you were involved, where did this body sit? Which officers?
You mean the informal one before?
The informal one, yes.
Partly in security head office in Pretoria. There was also an office at a military police base somewhere in Pretoria.
Now, the Truth Commission reached a finding, and we'll pull it out shortly, that in the beginning, this body, which you were involved in and subsequently transformed into Travis, initially selected targets of individuals across the border or overseas, but that by the mid-1980s, it was also doing so internally. Is that a correct finding?
I believe so. My involvement and the involvement of my sections was solely involved on identification of people outside the country, because that's where we were operating.
Yes. Well, I will pull a few references on that score shortly. But perhaps if we can just finish up with your useful submission to the Truth Commission, and if I can refer you to page 7, paragraph 5.8 at the bottom. And this is as part of the discussion of the state security system at the time and its structures. You say, alongside all of the above, the state and its security forces maintained and expanded their secret abilities to attack their enemies without necessarily having to accept responsibility for what was done. The basis of such operations in the grey zone was deniability. Can you explain to the court what you meant by that?
My lady, this wasn't a unique South African approach. In many revolutionary situations, particularly in countries where some or other form of the rule of law exists and there are democratic principles, often the security forces feel that the revolutionaries take advantage of the rights that they have through the democratic rule of law that exists in the very society that they are trying to destroy. And we're talking now theoretically, and the fact is that it's basically, in many instances, an accepted counter-revolutionary procedure to go outside the rule of law and attack the revolutionary enemy directly, even if this is in effect illegal. And that is the basis, was the basis of our TRC, that we went and confessed which type of these actions were in fact carried out.
when you talk about the grey zone of deniability, what do you specifically mean? Is it putting the security forces, or perhaps the senior personnel, maybe even the politicians, in a position where they can deny what went down? Is that what you mean by the grey zone of deniability?
Yes, my lady. In most instances, the 11th commandment was, "Thou shalt not be found out," and there was usually a story, a cover story, and so when something happened, there was what was regarded as a reasonable explanation, but not the truth. And I made very clear, I don't know whether it's this submission, but I did say at the TRC that the political leadership in our country abrogated their responsibility and deliberately created the situation that they could say they didn't see. They had blinkers on, and they evaded any way that they would get or be held to legal responsibility. And as I said, that it's not unique to South Africa. You see it in most, specifically counter-revolutionary warfare, wherever it's happened.
Yes.
So the cover story would be aimed at denying the true state of affairs.
Yes, yes. There would be an acceptable, reasonable cover story. So people would say, "Oh well, this happened, and this is why it happened," which was not true.
Yes. We certainly want to return to the role of the politicians, but while we're on cover stories, let's return to the Cradock 4 case. In this instance, the story that was put out publicly at the time was that the Cradock 4 deaths were the result of internal faction fighting between the United Democratic Front and a body by the name of the ZAPO. And in fact, there were tensions between those bodies in the Eastern Cape and elsewhere. And that story was put out by the police at the time. Do you recall that?
I do, my lady.
And where would that cover story have been hatched?
That would have been Stratcom, my lady, strategic communication. Or if it was a military operation, it was called ComOps, communication operations.
And we know of a Stratcom within the State Security Council, but I understand in your division there was also a strategic communications department.
Yes, it went all the way down to all the different, right down to security branch level.
I see. So it was part of, I suppose, the chain of command from the State Security Council.
It was
through the security branch, your department, and then down to provinces and towns.
Yes, it was a strategy, and so, like other strategies, it was implemented right through.
So anybody within that Stratcom chain could conceivably have come up with that story and passed it on to the police in the Eastern Cape?
Or maybe the local police there came up with, somewhere it came up and it would have been somehow communicated, this is the story, so make sure your agents working in the media feed them that story. So then you get a story that informed sources say that, And then the SABC says that that's how it works.
And so it becomes official in the,
yes.
at least in the public media.
Yes.
And you carry on at the page, at the top of page 8 in your submission to the TRC. It is for this reason that specific chains of responsibility will in many instances be impossible to determine. The operational procedures were designed by people who knew the law in order to circumvent proof of legal responsibility by the deed by the upper echelon. And perhaps just let me quote another paragraph on the same theme in 5.9. With the benefit of hindsight, it appears that the upper echelons, especially the politicians, were so keen to be at legal arm's length from covert action that they abdicated their responsibility to exercise close operational supervision of such actions. Now, that seems to strike a resonance with the case before this Honourable Court, because there is evidence that there was communication between Eastern Province Command, the Joint Management Centre, locally known as the JMC, with the Secretariat at the State Security Council in Pretoria. We don't have evidence, though, that famous signal that no doubt you're aware of, the so-called permanent removal signal sent on the 7th of June 1985, whether in fact it served before the council itself. So we now seek your help, Mr. Williamson. When you talk about chains of responsibility and you talk about legal arm's length, can you apply those concepts to what was happening in this particular case, where we are short of information, but we know that there was communication between the Joint Management Committee and the Secretariat of the State Security Council in Pretoria?
Yeah, my lady, I mean, obviously I stand behind everything I've said to the TRC and in this document. And I think that everybody who was involved at that time knew that the last thing that would be done would be to, in any public forum like State Security Council committee or so on, make any radical proposal for example, to eliminate or neutralize or kill. And that everything was discussed with, I mean, the nomenclature used was like, I mean, I watched the videos that were presented to the court. Were designed to, as far as I'm concerned, well, they were basically, everybody knew what they meant, but it was like a smokescreen. And where I say that the lack of operational control is because the people didn't have, they suffered from LMF, lack of moral fiber, and they weren't prepared to actually say what specifically they wanted done. So they made it so vague and all-encompassing, and then washed their hands of it and left it up to the individual security force people. And that's where they lost operational control. Because, my lady, the fact is that not all acts
of particular individuals, what would be the procedure in terms of the handling of that signal at the Secretariat?
My lady, I can only speculate. I was not involved, but obviously that is quite a serious report coming from the ground level to the Secretariat, saying that we have a very serious situation, and the following, we are suggesting the following action, and that action would have been then discussed within the Secretariat, and proposals would have been made to the State Security Council itself. And that the same procedure would have followed any report sent from local level through to the Secretariat, to the State Security Council.
And were all discussions at the State Security Council minuted and recorded, or with some off the books, so to speak?
I have no idea, my lady. I know a lot was minuted because we've all been at the Armed Forces hearing. We were presented with various documents from the State Security Council, which I'd personally never seen before.
Yes.
But it was all collated and minuted.
Let's return to the so-called line functions or command. I think it is your evidence before the TRC that typically requests such as this one would go up the chain of command and then in effect down the other side. But if I understand your evidence correctly, and perhaps later we'll extract it, you have suggested that wasn't always the case. That at times it wasn't only vertical, it was also horizontal, perhaps between the Secretariat and various divisions within the security apparatus.
Yes, my lady, particularly where further information was required, that there would be requests then to get some more information and present it through to the Secretariat.
And I think you mentioned earlier that the Secretariat itself was dominated by security officers, particularly military officers, but it also included police officers or security branch officers.
And national intelligence.
And national intelligence.
Which is another point that I've made, my lady, is that all documents were drafted by those types of officers, all trained in a specific discipline, which was counter-revolutionary warfare. And it's pretty surprising to me, my lady, that the politicians never, I mean, they some of them have turned around afterwards and said, oh, well, they didn't understand what some of this terminology meant, but they're the people who appointed those officers to do that job, and one would have thought that there's a clear understanding of I mean, if a report comes up and uses certain terminology, that the politically responsible people should understand what the document means.
And while we're talking about politicians, politicians such as the late President F.W. de Klerk and others, they have gone on record quite often stating that at their level they didn't know what was going on. They had no idea that operations like the Cradock 4 murders were being carried out by police officers. Is that part of this legal arm's length that you're talking about?
Yes, my lady, making sure that legal responsibility for what happened couldn't be pinned on them, or couldn't easily be pinned on them.
And while we're discussing politicians, and you watched the video in which the late Mr. Adrian Vlok was questioned in an Al Jazeera documentary, and he gave his view on the infamous signal. We don't have to repeat that view here. It's on the record. But there was another meeting of the State Security Council not long after the signal had been sent. So that signal was sent on the 7th of June. And then there was a State Security Council meeting in Cape Town on the 10th of June. It took place at Tuinhuis. My lady, this is in volume H at page 439. And just given the timing, I'd like to put this extract to you and ask you some questions on it. It's titled Agenda Item 3, Sake voortspruitend uit die notulen. Item 1, Inligting, Voorlichting, Gesprek met GBS voorzitters. And that's a reference to the Joint Management Committee chairpersons. Adjunct Minister Vlok doen verslag dat hy met die GBS voorsitters gesels het en dat dit duidelik was dat hulle soms probleme het dat departemente verteenwoordigers nie die nodige opdragte of delegasies het om op eie initiatief op te tree nie. Die secretariat het nou gereël dat waar sulke optredes dringend noodsaaklik is, die GBS voorsitters hulle planne direk aan die betrokke departments voorlê by 'n vergadering waar adjunct minister Vlok ook teenwoordig is en waar departemente dan saam besin oor die beste optrede. Hy spreek die vertroue uit dat die metode snelle optrede deur betrokke departemente sal bewerkstellig. Now, our understanding of that extract is that Minister Vlok said that there were urgent issues with the local JMCs and that they needed the necessary delegations in order to take their own initiatives. And do you agree that this is a curious item agenda where Minister Vlok says he will be addressing this with the JMCs? We find it curious because Brigadier Joffel van der Westhuizen, who was the chair of the JMC in the Eastern Cape and was in fact the individual who sent off but authorized the 7 June signal. Barely 3 days later, we have the State Security Council in the form of Minister Vlok saying that he's now going to get the necessary delegations so that the JMCs can effectively take their own initiatives. Do you agree that that timing is no coincidence?
My lady, it's impossible for me to comment, but I wasn't involved, but it appears to me that people were trying to short-circuit things and carry that maybe the entire state security process was a bit, Afrikaans word would be lomp, was a bit, and so there were some easier ways or quicker ways.
Yes. And then less than 3 weeks later, the murders are in fact carried out. And people involved, or at least people who authorized it, individuals such as Harold Snyman, who at the time was head of security branch in Port Elizabeth, and some others, in fact, were part of the local JMC. So we see a thread running through these circumstances. Do you see a similar thread?
My lady, I certainly can't deny that there's such a thread.
And perhaps just the last quote from your submission to the TRC, that's the one dated 9 October 1997. You said, my security force colleagues and I did not see, we're on page 10, lady. My security force colleagues and I did not see the liberation movements and their members as fellow citizens of our society. We regarded them as an alien enemy which threatened our society. Our job was to eliminate that threat. Would that passage, Mr. Williamson, aptly describe the operation that was carried out against the Cradock Four?
My lady, in 1961, the South African Communist Party declared war on the state, and the state reacted. And over years, the threat increased and state reaction increased, and we got to a situation where we were basically in a civil war. And there's a famous saying that politics is war without bloodshed. War is politics with bloodshed. And we were in a war. And the revolutionary enemy was not only threatening the stability of the state. I mean, we've all heard the evidence of the situation in the Eastern Cape at that time. But there was also, there were acts of revolutionary violence. There were car bombs, there were limpet mines, there were land mines, there were hand grenades, there were shootings. And we got to the situation that the goal was to eliminate the enemy. And the enemy was clearly defined. And the enemy were trying to eliminate us, and we were trying to eliminate them.
So would you say the sentiment expressed here would accord with the manner in which the Cradock Four was...
The Cradock Four would have been seen as key revolutionaries involved in the situation at that time in the Eastern Cape. And again, I can refer to Mr. van Jaarsveld's evidence. I only for the first time saw it now recently, where he refers to a G document. And I have no knowledge of that document, but if it is what he described it to be, that would explain that these people were seen to be part of a key part of one has to understand that revolution isn't only violent. Politics, the most powerful political influence on earth is public opinion. And the ANC and the Communist Party and Umkhonto we never had a chance They couldn't overthrow the state. They didn't have the military power to overthrow the state. But they had the political power to work with the public opinion to almost bring the state to a standstill. I always used, when I gave lectures, I used to use the example of the Shah of Iran. And I used to ask my colleagues, what do you think the Shah of Iran's security forces could do when 1 million people just sat in front of them and said, no, you can't go, no more, we're not going to accept this. And if you've got people who are a serious threat and who are capable of bringing an area, or whether it be small or large, of the country into a revolutionary situation, it doesn't surprise me that somebody decided to eliminate them.
Thank you, Mr. Williamson. Just on that score, and since you've raised the G document, or as it's more commonly known as the G plan, there is evidence before this Honourable Court that the G plan was devised by the late Matthew Ganiwe, together with his comrades, to mobilise the Eastern Cape community through street committees, village and town committees, and they also had their own provincial structure. And their activities included things such as school boycotts on occasion, consumer boycotts, protests, but at other times negotiations and the like. So in this paragraph, when you speak of alien enemies which threatened our society, I take it you're not simply referring to combatants, but you're also referring to individuals who in this case might have been a headmaster, school teachers, working for the municipality in other cases, but because they were very successful in mobilizing the community, and in Mr. Ganiwe's case, and Mr. Kalata's case and the others, potentially the whole region, that they were a legitimate target for elimination.
Yes, because mass mobilization could have brought the country to a standstill. It could have, that was the aim and objective of the ANC, because they knew very well that they weren't going to overthrow the state with Umkhonto we Sizwe. That mass mobilization, trade unions, were the biggest part of their arsenal.
And to reinforce your point, there is evidence before the amnesty committees, for those who have applied for amnesty for this incident, that other efforts to neutralize Mr. Ganiwe and his colleagues had failed. For example, security detentions, restrictions, court processes. Those efforts were not working, and therefore they had to be eliminated because they had run out of avenues to pursue.
Makes sense, my lady.
My lady, I see it's almost 1 p.m. Would this be a good opportunity for the lunch adjournment?
You still have more questions to ask?
I still have some more questions, my lady.
Will I check for lunch to resume at 2 o'clock?
Please.
All right.
Brigadier Cronje, that these reports went through his own head office and then up to the State Security Council, and so claims of denial from the level of the State Security Council are not to be believed.
Once again, my lady, I can't, out of my own knowledge, comment on Brigadier Cronje's statement, but it accords with the experience that I had. And I once, in fact, gave evidence, I think, at a TRC hearing or somewhere, where I actually asked, who do these politicians think are killing all these ANC people who get blown up in Swaziland when they start their car? Did they think it was the fairies?
Yes, I do recall that that quote from you. And in fact, the TRC does quote you talking about information getting into political hands. And that's at paragraph 362. Applicant Craig Williamson, who was a political appointee in the President's Council in the late 1980s, commented, and they quote you, once it got up to the NGBS, in brackets NJMC, and I assume that's National Joint Monitoring Committee, SSC structure, it became the political control level where a deputy minister then received the information from the civil service below. And when I say civil service, I include the security forces. And this information was then fed up via the work committee and the State Security Council. And on a political level, I believe directly either to Cabinet or to the State President. Once the information had arrived at the NGBS and then to the State Security Council, the information was in political hands. So what was the point that you were trying to get across to the Truth Commission when you spoke about that information getting into political hands?
My lady, then it became a political decision. It was the decision of what further action was going to happen was a political one.
Mr. Williamson, if we can turn to some interesting comments you made, in fact, during your amnesty hearing. Milady, we're now referring to volume L1, item 6, and it deals with day 6 of Mr. Williamson's amnesty hearing. And I think you make some important comments in relation to how instructions came from the State Security Council and the line function. So Mr. du Plessis puts a question to you. And Mr. Williamson, obviously not each and every decision could have been diverted straight up through all the channels to Cabinet to deal with it. There was a delegation of powers, and certain ranks of officers had jurisdiction to make decisions on their own. Isn't that so? And you respond, yes, Chairman. I attempted also previously in my evidence to sketch that situation and to say that when it came, we had first to take the line function that we, as part of the SAP, and that part of the line function obviously was focused, or certain units were focused specifically on the revolutionary onslaught. And because the revolutionary onslaught was of such preoccupation, not only to ourselves but to everybody in government, certain special structures, as we have discussed, and we saw the video this morning, relating to the national management system and the national security management system, everything were put in place. And I did give the example, I think yesterday, of a time where if I was sent to a meeting of a subcommittee of the Secretariat of the State Security Council, that I would be told, for example, there is a problem. Go and find out what it is and do whatever you can to solve that problem. Now, I assume the reason I'd been sent to the meeting is because my chief, who had sent me to the meeting, had already in brief been told what the problem was, and he had decided that I and or my section could assist in solving this problem. And I said, and I repeat, that in a fast-moving world, in a particularly when you are dealing sometimes with a revolutionary situation, with activities relating to that, one had to move with speed. And perhaps let's just pause there. So it does seem that from time to time you would have direct contact with the Secretariat of the State Security Council to discuss issues of concern.
Yes, my lady. When, as I said there, when the order had come through my line function, had obviously come from a discussion at either the Secretariat or the State Security Council that there's a particular issue that needs to be looked at, they would then find a suitable unit or officer to deal with it.
And it seems from the next quote that there was some flexibility worked into the system. It was standard procedure that we weren't, I don't know what word to use, certainly it is not that we were in any way competing with each other or hostile to each other, but once we were working as a team, and I'll say maybe a member of my unit or the intelligence unit of the security police, and then some military officers or some national intelligence officers or whoever it was working now with a problem that was being dealt with in a different line function, the line function of the state, the Secretariat of the State Security Council. I, and the example I gave, I did not go, once I heard what the problem was, I did not go back to my brigadier and ask him to go through all the structures to find out whether finally the whole State Security Council agreed or would give me an order to carry out a certain function. The decision was, for example, surveillance must be carried out on this particular individual now, and that I was sent. I was told this is what needs to be done. I issued the instructions. They were done. I must say, Mr. Williamson, it does seem that you were asked to carry out, for example, surveillance on an individual, not named in this particular instance, you're only giving an example. But that seemed to be not an unusual request to come from the Secretariat of the State Security Council.
No, my lady. It would all depend on the specific problem that had to be dealt with. In my instance, for example, there was a problem with the Mozambique situation when after the Nkomati Accord, and we had covert support for Renamo. There was a specific individual who was causing problems, and I was tasked to put surveillance on this person and to try and stop his interference in the process of the Nkomati Accord. That's the type of thing, the type of order that came through because of something that was being dealt with at State Security Council level, came back through the Secretariat saying we need extra help or input, and then some or other unit would be tasked to give that assistance or input.
You mentioned in your response that the National Intelligence Service was involved in these operations. What do you typically play?
My lady, all the intelligence agencies had sources, agents, officers, all working in the same pool, as it were. So there had to be some coordination to avoid what all too often happens, not only happened in South Africa, but happens internationally, where you get intelligence agencies tripping over each other and probably to the detriment of the overall goal. So it has to be properly coordinated.
Then Mr. Du Plessis puts another question to you, and Mr. Williamson, for instance. Let us say that you obtained information about armed insurgents having crossed the border, would it have been necessary to consult Cabinet or the State Security Council to take action before somebody could take action against them, or would that decision have been made by lower ranking officers? In your response, no, Mr. Chairman, that would in all likelihood have been made by lower ranking officers, because that would have been absolutely in the line function of those officers. So it seems that you and your teams did have authority to take certain actions within South Africa, and you wouldn't necessarily have to go up the chain of command to get that authority.
Well, my lady, it wouldn't have been my teams that would have taken the action. My teams would have reported that this incursion is going to happen, and it would have been either military or police teams that would have reacted to that.
And you mentioned, I think, in response to questions put to you this morning, the difference between intelligence officers and agents, and you've given us that distinction. Were you aware of any such agents being placed in Cradock or Lingalishlet, the township next to Cradock?
Not specifically, my lady.
Now, we have spoken about Trevitz earlier, and you've confirmed that Trevitz was a target identification center or system, and that you weren't personally involved in the Trevitz itself, but with its predecessor. And I had asked you also whether there were cabinet committees that controlled the activities of a group such as Trevitz. Were you aware of a special cabinet committee that oversaw the work of Trevitz?
No, my lady.
Because there does seem to be evidence, and we'll have to investigate further, that there was such a special cabinet committee, which included cabinet ministers and not just security ministers. But you say you have no knowledge of that?
No, no recollection of that, my lady.
And in the same hearing, on page 13, so this is still day 6, you were answering questions put to you by Mr. du Plessis. And perhaps I'll just read it to you and seek your comment. Mr. du Plessis says, "Now, Mr. Williamson, let us come to other examples where this happened. In respect of, I'm going to put it to you, and I'm just going to ask you that accords with your experience of how the command structure and orders happened. In the Zero hand grenade incident, I don't know if you recall that incident which became known as 00 hand grenade.
In eastern Johannesburg.
Yes, indeed.
Yes, my lady.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but this was an incident in which security police booby-trapped hand grenades, which went off, killing a number of people. Is that your recollection?
That's correct, my lady.
So in the 0 hand grenade incident, evidence was given before the committee that General Lachranji gave an order to General van der Merwe at that time to execute that operation, which order came down from General van der Merwe to Brigadier Cronje, Colonel de Kock, Colonel Venter, right down to Joe Mamasela. Now, General van der Merwe, as I understand it, was the head of the security branch at that time, and General Coetzee was Commissioner of Police. In that incident, General Coetzee was excluded from the line of command. Do you have any comment on that? In your response, I think, Mr. Chairman, the question related to General Lacranje. I think that must be Minister Lacranje. I think you're correct on that score. No, I don't even think I was in the police at that stage. I have no comment. I cannot comment. It's perfectly possible that General Coetzee was in or out of the chain of command. And Mr. du Plessis says, well, that was 1985. The same happened in 1985 when Minister Lacranje was involved in a discussion in the Eastern Cape in respect of or where certain security policemen were present. Harold Snyman, Herman du Plessis were present there, and as a result of the discussion that took place there, they took action which resulted in the PEPCO incident and the Ganiwe incident. In that incident, people between the minister, such as the head of the security police and the commissioner, was not involved in the line of command. Your response? Again, Mr. Chairman, I wasn't involved. I can't comment beyond saying it is possible, but I can make personally in the office to deal with this specific matter. Neither my group head nor the commanding officer were present. I was sent to deal with the minister. You recall that exchange in the amnesty hearing?
I do,
Yes.
my lady.
In response to that interaction between Minister Lacranje and certain security policemen, you indicated that you weren't involved then, you had no knowledge.
Yeah, I was that time already moving out of the SAP. Yeah.
But then you said there was at least one occasion where you were sent personally or directly to Minister Lacranje's office to deal with a specific matter that neither your group head or commanding officer were present. Do you recall what that one matter was?
I'm afraid I don't think I do, my lady. Two possibilities. I don't know which. Maybe the London bomb. The other possibility was the murder of the Ribeiros, which was a political problem because the security branch had, in murder and robbery, had in fact identified that it was military intelligence personnel who had been involved. So it could have been either of those two that I was asked to brief the minister on serious political repercussions that could or could not occur.
Yes. And by coincidence, one of the applications for amnesty that Jaap van Jaarsveld did was in relation to the Ribeiro murders, where he admitted that he was an accessory after the fact. He helped to cover up those crimes. Were you aware of that?
I'm aware the security branch covered it up, yes, my lady.
And were you aware of the involvement of Jaap van Jaarsveld?
Not particularly, my lady. It was... It wasn't, I mean, I was at a different level. It was done on the ground, yeah.
So there is evidence before the Amnesty Committee that Harold Snyman, who in 1985 was the security branch commander of the Port Elizabeth area, together with other individuals, in fact the individuals mentioned in the paragraph Mr. du Plessis put to you, that they did meet with Minister Louis Lachranji, who was Law and Order Minister at the time. And according to Harold Snyman in his amnesty application, he was told to make a plan with the Cradock Four, and he interpreted that as eliminating the Cradock Four. So that does seem to back up the notion that was put to you that these instructions came in different forms. It didn't always come down the official channel, but sometimes took place in a one-to-one meeting, or perhaps in other meetings.
Yes, my lady, with people who were senior within these different structures. So it was taken in the same way as that structure giving the instruction. It's like the head, or one of the heads of that structure, giving a... And of course, the concept of need to know applies. They don't want everybody to know. So a few people are in the loop. The rest are all out of the loop.
Thank you, Mr. Williamson. No further questions, my lady.
Thank you, Mr. Barney. Any questions, Mr. Fushia? Okay. Any re-examination, Mr. Celia? Mr. Celia?
I'll be brief, my lady. Mr. Williamson, just on one issue, you did refer to the fact that you applied for amnesty, and amnesty was indeed granted. Am I correct that my understanding is that you applied in 3 instances for amnesty?
That is correct, my lady.
And in all 3 instances, amnesty was granted?
That's correct, my lady.
And you've that occurred outside the borders of South Africa?
That's correct, my lady.
So you did participate in the process of amnesty and applications for amnesty?
My lady, I think I said earlier, I actually don't know of a security force officer and later on politician who did more than I did to try and explain what the security forces were doing during the times that we are discussing in the past.
And would there be anything in the way of you applying for amnesty relating to the Cradock 4 if you had any knowledge or any involvement of it?
The reason I perhaps incorrectly ignored it was because I regarded it as ridiculous. I was not involved, and I wasn't actually interested in what somebody would say for their own whatever reason. Perhaps I shouldn't have been so flippant about it, but I did know I would have to address the matter at some stage, and it was addressed with Mr. Bezos.
But if you were involved, you could have and you would have applied for amnesty.
Of course, because if I applied for what I applied for amnesty, why would I have applied for amnesty on this matter? And I would have been as forthright about the Cradock 4 murders as I had been about the Skuans, the Firsts, and taking a unit to the United Kingdom and blowing up the ANC office.
I have no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Williamson. Thank you for your time. You may now stand down. You are excused.
Thank you, my lady.
That is the evidence for today.
And as far as tomorrow is concerned, the plan still stands.
Yes, my lady. I just want to confirm, my learned friend. I think the evidence would be virtually tomorrow. I just want to confirm.
Both. Way of virtual.
My lady, my learned friend has just confirmed both the witnesses tomorrow, their testimony will be via virtual, as Mr. De Beers was.
All right.
Milady, just a point I'd like to make. Is it possible if the court excuses me for tomorrow, Thursday and Friday? I'm going to attend the virtual evidence in the offices of Mr. Siliani in Pretoria.
I don't think anyone will have any objection that will be missing you. Will
No, I know
anyone be
Mr.
missing?
Faulkman he would immediately say, please don't let him come back. But I'm asking you, Milady.
All right. In that case, then you'll be excused from attending court for the
Next few
rest
days.
of the week.
Thank you. Thank you.
But I take it you will make arrangements to
I'm going to attend with
fall
Mr.
in with
Siliani.
whatever arrangements are made for the future.
Yes, I will. I'll arrange with the Faulkman too. Thank you.
All right.
My lady, I can confirm that we have already arranged a specific premises with proper facilities. We have an expert IT person on standby who will attempt to ensure that we have proper linkage with you.
And that the witnesses don't mute themselves.
Yes, my lady, certainly so. So yes, we will fly back tonight, and we will start the arrangements as from tomorrow morning, say at 6, 7 o'clock. We will be ready by 10 o'clock.
You let me know when everyone's ready.
It's my heart to inform the court that these two support my application.
All right.
May I please report, my lady? May we also request just for Friday that we will also be seated at Chambers, that we also be excused just for Friday. We will fly back to tomorrow night.
All right.
As it pleases, my lady.
My lady, if there are no other housekeeping matters that my colleagues wish to address, I have 3 matters that I need to ask the court an indulgence for to just address. The first is that I gave an undertaking yesterday to revert on the statement of General van der Westhuizen. I was reminded by my colleagues who attended the case management meeting before your ladyship on Friday, the 3rd of October, I believe, that the question was also asked then, and that the indication was that a statement would not be forthcoming. The position has not changed, so I just wanted to make sure that that is clarified.
That has been noted, yes.
The second matter, my ladies, I took note of your views yesterday about general applications and arguments regarding questions and admissibility. We also anticipate that there will be questions for General van der Westhuizen to which there may be objections. We do not intend to raise any general arguments in advance regarding the questions themselves, but we have made the effort to compile shortheads of argument relating to the factual submissions and the legal arguments which we do wish to advance when those questions arise, my lady, on a question-by-question basis. And with the leave of the court, the heads of argument have been distributed amongst the parties, but for the convenience of the court, if I may hand up a copy, if and when such questions arise, then the court will be in possession of a copy of the arguments. Thank you, my lady. And lastly then, of course, for the purposes of decorum, we will also be returning to Pretoria this evening, and Advocate van Zyl and I will be participating as from tomorrow morning virtually from Pretoria with the leave of the court, and we ask that we be excused from physical
Mr.
attendance. Thank you, my lady.
Okay, any other issues people want to raise, council wish to raise?
My lady, just in response to my learned friend that there'll be no statement forthcoming from General van der Westhuizen, my lady, our understanding of the normal practice of inquests is that witnesses, particularly witnesses that are represented, and not just represented by any team, but a senior counsel, that the normal course and practice that statements are provided to assist the court and the parties. And we find it not just unusual, but problematic.
I think the last time the point was raised that that statement would simply amount to, I have no knowledge of the allegations.
Well, in that case, my lady, the statement should still have been put up, making whatever claims. All other parties are obliged to put up statements, and we're of the view that Mr. van der Westhuizen should have put up a statement as well. But I'll leave it in your ladyship's hands.
Point taken. Alright, that the court will adjourn until tomorrow at 9:30, or as soon as the court is ready. Court will adjourn for the day.